Lee promoted the idea of Chinese culture and Chinese values as being at the center of Singapore's national identity, introducing institutional advantages for ethnic Chinese Singaporeans in education, civil service, and the military. Lee also wanted to develop his view on autocratic government, citing what he called Chinese values and then the more plural Asian values. He interprets this term with the more ethnically specific term Confucian values, which he regarded as more culturally authentic and more closely fitting the Singapore's predominantly ethnic Chinese population. Despite being colonized by the Western countries, Singapore did not embrace its Western heritage, but they embraced Asian cultures. So you can see the Chinese values and the Confucian's values are regarded as more onto the Singapore culture. Lee Sr. handed the prime ministership to Goh Chok Tong, but retained the number 2 position under the title of senior minister without portfolio, and as a chairman of PAP, was seen to still control events in Singapore. Goh was regarded as a capable administrator but was in reality just filling in while Lee's son, Lee Hsien Loong, was being groomed for the prime ministership. It is the orchestration of Lee Kuan Yew so that his son Lee Hsien Loong can assume his power. Lee Kuan Yew was secretly grooming his son to be the next, while he handed the ministership to Goh Chok Tong. Here we can see the background of his son Lee Hsien Loong, soon to be the next Prime Minister of Singapore. In 1971, he was awarded the highly prestigious President's Scholarship. Entering the Army, the similarly prestigious Singapore Armed Forces Overseas Scholarship, and earned an MA in Public Administration at Harvard University. He was also quickly promoted to the rank of Brigadier General before entering politics in 1984. Age 32, where he was quickly appointed by his father as Minister of Trade and Industry and Defense. Lee Sr. or Lee Kuan Yew retirement in 1990, Lee Jr. was appointed as Deputy Prime Minister, and Lee assumed more political responsibility and was again seen to be on the path of eventual prime ministership, which he assumed in 2004. When Lee Kuan Yew died in March 2013, there was some nervousness at the person who had been at the helm of Singapore's growth from a third world outpost to a first world economic power was no longer there. The reality, however, was that despite his central role as a political strategist and the fact that he did have a strong vision for Singapore, no state building project is the work of one person, and Singapore had a plethora of talented economic architects. More importantly, Lee had long previously handed over the reins of power, stepping back slowly through the roles of senior minister and minister mentor, formally retiring in 2011. The maintenance of power. The methods of maintaining PAP political control have been various, but three key points stand out as a gross breaches of conventional democratic parliamentary behavior. In this first process, the electoral boundaries of unsafe or challenged seats are reconfigured to isolate polling booths to return a strong anti-government vote. The effect of this was to incorporate those anti-government areas into more strongly government electorates. The second key method for the government to maintain political control through the electoral process has been to change the electoral rules prior to elections and sometimes after election campaigns had already commenced. Singapore began as a one-person per seat parliamentary system, but later introduced group representational constituencies, a multi-person per seat system in which the successful team takes all seats. The last and the third main method of maintaining political control was by instilling a degree of circumspection into the electorate. Residence committees or RCs were used as a means of surveillance of disgruntled citizens and as a conduit for threats of loss and of access to government services. The Singapore's judiciary. Singapore's use and abuse of its judicial system and previously extrajudicial methods to restrict or repress political opponents had become a well-honed art under the prime ministership of Lee Kuan Yew and have continued to be used under his successors. Although Singapore claims to derive its political process from Britain, its practices are very far from those of a functioning democracy in which all people are regarded as equal before the law and the law is applied in an even-handed manner. The use of the law for political purposes would not be a tool available to the government under the conventions of the Westminster parliamentary systems, nor under any system which accepted the necessity of maintaining a separation of the roles and influences of the political executive and the judiciary. The so-called separation of powers, however, under the Singaporean system there is no effective separation of powers, and as a consequence, judges often hand down decisions based less on law on political expediency. Democratic challenge in Singapore. There was a thought that after so long almost entirely dominated by the PAP, the 2015 elections might start to show the beginning of an opening of Singapore's political space. 8 parties, including what appeared to be a somewhat resurgent Workers' Party and a handful of independent candidates, contested the elections, making it the most contested in Singapore's political history. And Singapore's 2011 elections had given to a rising tide of disenchantment with the country's open policy on guest workers, with a country of 3 million hosting a million foreign workers. 2015 elections on the evening of 8 September, Lee Hsien Loong addressed a PAP rally with that was a speech marked by a lack of fluency, calm, and confidence. It was the pleading speech of a political leader who appeared to be panicking, made all the worse by focusing on the issues on which the government had performed poorly: housing, incomes, and working conditions, public transports. Audience responses were unsurprisingly with so little to be inspired by, less than rapturous. It seems as though PAP and in particular its leader could be in real political trouble. The results of the 2015 elections showed that with just a modicum of political effort as well as its other less free and fair tactics, the PAP could continue not just to win but to dominate Singapore's political landscape. From its control of constituencies right down to where people lived, through to its various mechanisms for exclusion and punishments, its control over the media, its manipulation of electoral boundaries, and perhaps more than anything else, its overall economic success, it seemed unlikely that the people of Singapore would easily be able or perhaps want to abandon the comfort and the security of the PAP's known quantity